Well, it's no secret U.S. President Donald Trump is no fan of NAFTA. He was bashing the agreement again today. But there's a bit of a mixed message going on here. He reportedly wants to get a deal done sooner rather than later. Here he is speaking earlier today.
NAFTA has been great for Mexico, has not been good for the United States. A lot of businesses have closed down because of NAFTA. You look at empty plants all over the place, and this is from years ago. They still haven't recovered. NAFTA has been a terrible deal for the United States. We're renegotiating the deal right now, but it'll still be good for Mexico and for Canada.
A terrible deal, one he wants to get done in a week or so. The CBC's Katie Simpson is trying to decode the latest signals that are coming about the state of NAFTA talks, and she joins us now. So, Katie, what are you hearing about this push to get a deal done in the next few weeks? I mean, that's really fast.
It is, and some of the observers that we've sort of been speaking with suggest that it would be nearly impossible to get that done, yet some of the senior sources I'm speaking with suggest that anything is possible, and that at this point the Americans are being more positive and more productive or more constructive than they have been in the last 8 months of this negotiating process. So Donald Trump today really went out of his way to target NAFTA, taking his frustration about American immigration laws out on NAFTA, linking the two, saying, you know, doing that on Twitter and at a couple of public events he had today. And those comments come at a time when behind the scenes we're hearing that, as you mentioned, Bloomberg is reporting Donald Trump wants a deal in principle mapped out in the next couple of weeks before all three leaders, the leaders of Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. meet at the Summit of the Americas. We've been able to confirm that Chrystia Freeland is expected to head to Washington later this week. Her office is still finalizing her travel details, but she is expected to be meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. We know that the Mexicans have sent a delegation to Washington this week for more meetings with the Trump administration. It's unclear if Chrystia Freeland is going to meet with the Mexicans as well, or if there'll be any trilateral meetings at that level. But what we are seeing from the outside is a number of high-level meetings, this urgent push behind the scenes to make progress on this, despite what Donald Trump is saying publicly about what he thinks of the trade deal.
Now, the last time you and I checked in on this issue, there were still pretty major issues on the table. Where are we now, especially in terms of those really big ones that have until now been an obstacle?
Well, you know, NAFTA is going to be make or break on the auto sector. That's what sort of put us in this position right now. The Americans frustrated that that auto jobs keep going to the U.S. and concerns around labor standards and that sort of thing. We have seen some concessions from the Americans so far on the auto sector, so that is helping to build that positive momentum. But there are still some big concerns, particularly when it comes to how to settle trade disputes. The Americans want very different things from what Canada and Mexico want, and Canada, as we've seen over the past 8 months or so, really heavily depends on the rules-based system that is in place if, you know, there is a challenge to the way trade is taking place. So, of course, Canada has said that trade dispute resolution is sort of a red line for them, and it continues to be at this point.
All right. Thanks for this. As always, the CBC's Katie Simpson in Ottawa. For more on these latest developments on NAFTA, I'm joined by international trade lawyer Mark Warner. He's a principal at Ma Law. What do you make of this? Is there really an urgency to get this thing done in a couple of weeks?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is Donald Trump's way of negotiating. He likes leverage and he likes brinksmanship. So he's given us that May 1st deadline around the exemptions to the steel and aluminum. And now he's got another deadline, which is around this meeting in Peru, the Summit of the Americas, I guess. And I think that's just what he does. And if it doesn't work out, he'll find another.
There'll be another deadline further down the road. But like, I mean, some of it does make sense. That on the one hand, it feels like, as Katie was saying, the tone has shifted a little bit. They've got the U.S. midterms are coming up, but I think even more importantly, you've got the Mexican elections that are coming. There is a bit of a fixed timeline in which this round, if it's going to get done, it's got to get done soon.
I guess the first question I have is, what does it mean to get done? Like, what is?
Fair enough.
It'd be almost impossible to, I think, have a completed agreement. And from the point of view of the American electoral congressional process, an agreement in principle that's just bullets is worthless in terms of setting their timetable going. And I'm not sure that an agreement in principle with bullets is going to reverse the fortunes of the ruling party in Mexico in their presidential elections. So I think it's a chance for Trump to say to his voters in the midterm, I've got something, this is the direction. You know, he's kind of like an old Roman general, you know, making a desert and calling it peace, right? He's going to declare victory no matter what. We saw this last week with the Korean Free Trade Agreement. I think most trade experts looked at it and said, there's not much there. but he said, look at my massive victory.
Didn't I win?
And
look at me go.
Yeah, so I think there's some of that. But all that I think we could accomplish as negotiators in the next couple of weeks would be to say you've got about half the chapters finished that were easy because they were what I'll call modernization chapters, e-commerce, that kind of thing, building off TPP, and then have some sort of an outline that says this is where we're going on the other things, and then have some flowery language that we're good at drafting about dispute settlement, and they'll come out and they'll look into the cameras and say, we've got an agreement in principle. And of course, people like me will look at it and go, it doesn't look like you have an agreement, but it doesn't matter because everybody will say they've got an agreement in principle.
If they came out and said they have an agreement in principle, what are the steps? Because it's Congress that's got to sign this, right? Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Trump says. It matters what Congress votes on.
As far as I can see, an agreement in principle has no effect in the American system. Right. They need the clocks that have to start running in Congress run when there is a finalized agreement. So that is just a matter for public relations and public consumption. It has no relevance to the American congressional process. And I don't think they can do anything more than that. But it's still significant. I mean, if the parties can say we've agreed to the following points, I'll make the point about CETA. I mean, I'll say when CETA was supposedly finalized, people like me were coming back saying, I don't think you got
doesn't look all the way there yet. Right.
I think I was talking about Belgium when people were going, where is it? Same with the TPP or whatever it is they're calling it these days. So when there's a will among trading partners to declare something a victory, and they can do that. But that's about all they could do in the next 2 weeks. Is
there a scenario in which this more urgent or hastened timeline could be good news for Canada?
I think it can if we don't overplay our hand. I mean, I think Canada is sort of reading it from what I can get that Trump and his folks won an agreement very quickly. So let the Americans cave. Now, I think that we're going to have to compromise on a few things as well. We got out of it with auto so far, based on the public record a little bit. The emphasis seems to be on Mexico, letting the Mexicans, who were our great friends not too long ago, fight that one. But I think they'll be looking for something from us, probably on Chapter 19, the trade dispute settlement system. Chapter 11, that Congress was never liked it. That's the investor state dispute settlement system. Never liked the Trump proposal. So in a sense, we're letting the business community of the United States fight that fight for us. But I find it hard to believe that we would get out of it without making some kind of a concession on dispute settlement, just given the personalities involved. Having said that,
because at the end of the day, the dispute resolution mechanism we have now has never worked for us, has it?
I don't think it has.
I mean, we keep winning and nothing changes.
Which is my problem with the way the government has approached it. They've dug themselves in my view, with these red lines from the start about things that, frankly, haven't worked the way that it's being represented that they've worked, in terms of we don't use them that often, and B, when we've used them, the Americans have more or less said
just ignore them.
Yeah, and then we end up having to have a bilateral agreement, as in the old softwood lumber agreement. To Americans, Chapter 19 is really about softwood lumber, and to Canadians, the reason we like it is largely about softwood lumber. So that's part of the dynamic there, and I just think that with Lighthizer at the table, we're going to have to do something there.
Well, Peru just got interesting. We're going to keep our eyes on that. All right, Mark, great to see you. Thanks for doing this. International trade lawyer, Mark Warner.